They say history repeats itself, but prophecy doesn't echo. It warns, it prepares, and sometimes it waits for someone to finally pay attention. Jesus once said, "When you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, flee, not walk away, not pause to pray. Flee. Leave everything behind. Run for your life." But why? Why such urgency? What did he see in that future moment that would provoke such a dramatic command? For centuries, many believed the warning pointed to a political figure, a future tyrant, an external threat rising in opposition to the people of God. It made sense. It was comforting in a way. Because if the danger is out there, then we're safe in here. But what if we misunderstood it all along? What if Jesus wasn't just warning us about a coming enemy, but about a forgotten covenant? What if the abomination wasn't merely the arrival of darkness, but the absence of light, left unguarded because those entrusted to protect it had walked away? Today, Israel is preparing to rebuild the temple, to restore what once stood at the center of worship and national identity. Some watch with hope, others with suspicion, but few are asking the deeper question: if the holy place is being rebuilt, who will stand in it? Because prophecy doesn't just point to what will happen, it reveals who must rise to meet it. And if the temple is being prepared again, it's not just a stage for deception. It may be a mirror held up to a people who have forgotten what they were called to guard. Jesus didn't speak in riddles that day. He pointed to the scroll of Daniel, to a prophecy already known, already written, already taught. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, he said, let the reader understand. It was not just a reference, it was a plea. Let the reader understand. But did we? For many of us, that phrase has become a background hum in the grand story of the end times, something we've heard so often it slips past our minds unnoticed. We nod at the words, quote the chapter, recognize the danger, but we rarely stop to ask, do we actually see it, or are we just used to the sound of it? Daniel 9:27 isn't obscure. It's cited in sermons, prophecy charts, end-time discussions across generations. A covenant made, a sacrifice interrupted, and someone set in the place where only God belongs. The moment is so charged that Jesus says to flee, not reason, to escape, not debate. Yet somehow, in all our study, in all our doctrine, the weight of that moment feels diluted. It's possible to know a prophecy so well, we forget to wrestle with it. Possible to become so familiar with the words that we stop hearing the urgency. What if the misunderstanding is not about the text itself, but about our position toward it? What if we've grown blind, not because the prophecy is hidden, but because it's been lying open before us for so long, we no longer look at it with fear or awe or trembling? What if we've been standing near the holy place, nodding in agreement, while missing the voice that told us to flee? The prophecy begins not with destruction, but with a covenant. In Daniel 9:27, a figure arises who makes a binding agreement with the many for 1 week, one prophetic week, 7 years. But midway through, at the 3.5-year mark, the covenant is broken, the sacrifices stop, and something else takes their place. On the wing of abominations, desolation is unleashed, and the holy place, once the center of worship, is defiled. That's where most readers stop. They draw a line from this one who makes desolate to a future Antichrist, imagining a single man who betrays Israel, invades the temple, and demands worship. And in a sense, the text allows for that picture. But that isn't the whole picture, because Daniel doesn't speak of this abomination just once. He gives us 3 angles, 3 moments in time, each adding a piece to the puzzle. In Daniel 11:31, he speaks of forces who arise and defile the sanctuary, removing the daily offering and setting up the abomination. In Daniel 12:11, he adds precision. From the time the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination set up, there will be 1,290 days. Not metaphor, not symbol, countdown, 7 years, 3.5 years, 1,290 days. Every number points to a real timeline, a divine calendar moving forward, whether we see it or not. But here's where the pattern becomes unnerving. These numbers don't just describe the future, they echo the past. In 167 BC, a Greek king named Antiochus Epiphanes stormed Jerusalem. He didn't just conquer it, he desecrated it. He outlawed Jewish practices. He set up an altar to Zeus in the temple. He sacrificed pigs on it. He committed what many saw as the ultimate abomination. And for a moment, it seemed Daniel's prophecy had come true. But it hadn't. Not fully. Not yet. Because Antiochus didn't make a 7-year covenant. His reign didn't follow the prophetic countdown. And most importantly, Jesus, speaking 2 centuries later, referred to Daniel's abomination as a future event, meaning what Antiochus did was only a shadow, a rehearsal, a preview. Which leads to the question we've avoided for too long. If history already tried to fulfill this prophecy and failed, then what exactly is the fulfillment we're still waiting for? Why a new temple? Why a return to sacrifices? Why a stage being rebuilt for something we thought was finished long ago? And even deeper, who is actually at the center of this covenant? Is it the one who breaks it, or the people who forgot they were in it? Because Daniel never said the abomination would come out of nowhere. He said it would come after the offering stopped, after something holy was removed. And if that's true, then the real question isn't just who desecrates the temple, it's who let it become empty. We think of this prophecy as a warning about an Antichrist, and it is, but it may also be a mirror held up to a people who traded away their priesthood, a covenant once cut with blood, now forgotten, neglected, replaced by ritual without presence. Could it be that the true desecration is not simply an idol standing in the temple, but a temple built without remembering the one who once filled it? The countdown is real. The signs are aligning. But before we fear what's coming, we must ask, did the abomination begin with the one who entered, or with those who stopped keeping watch? If the holy place is defiled, we instinctively look outward. We scan the horizon for enemies, infiltrators, profaners. We imagine someone crossing a sacred line, someone else. But in Scripture, desecration doesn't begin with invasion. It begins with abandonment. Something unholy takes its place, not because it forced its way in, but because no one stood watch to keep it out. Jesus said, "When you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, flee." But he also said, "Let the reader understand." Understand what? that a place can only be desecrated if it was once consecrated, that a space meant for the presence of God must be guarded, not just architecturally, but spiritually. So who was meant to guard it? For generations, the answer would have been simple: the Levites, the sons of Aaron, the priesthood of the temple. But that priesthood was never meant to be the final picture. It was a shadow, a pattern, pointing towards something greater. The new covenant did not abolish the priesthood, it expanded it. According to 1 Peter chapter 2:9, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. You, not a class of clergy, not a tribe defined by bloodline, but you, the believer, were called to stand in the holy place. And yet, how many of us have forgotten that? We wait for a third temple. We track headlines about red heifers and building permits. But have we asked the deeper question: has the true temple already been rebuilt in you? If the body is now the temple of the Holy Spirit, if the church is now the dwelling place of God, then the holy place has already been assigned. The watch has already been posted. The question is whether anyone's still standing at their post. What if the abomination of desolation isn't only a literal event in a rebuilt temple, but a spiritual condition, when the people of covenant forget the covenant and let the holy place go unguarded? What if we've been watching for a sacrilege committed by others while ignoring the silence of a priesthood that fell asleep? The authority to stand in the holy place was never given to kings or politicians. It was given to priests. And if you belong to Christ, then you are called not just to believe, but to guard, to intercede, to worship, to stand. This is not someone else's battle, it is yours. The priesthood wasn't transferred to a nation-state, a religious institution, or a prophetic elite. It was given to those whose hearts have been made clean by the blood of the Lamb. So ask yourself, if the enemy walks into the temple, is it because he overpowered the gate, or because the gatekeepers were missing? If the holy place is compromised, is it because the Antichrist has risen, or because the royal priesthood forgot to rise first? The power to preserve what is sacred still rests with the ones God has chosen, and that includes you. You were never called to observe from the outside. You were called to carry the presence inside, to worship in spirit and truth, to remember the covenant not as a theology but as a trust, to stand in the holy place, not someday, but now. We often speak of prophecy as if it were a storm waiting on the horizon, unstoppable, timed to a divine clock that ticks independently of us. But what if that's not the full picture? What if prophecy is not just a forecast of what will happen, but a mirror that reveals who must rise? What if the prophecy has not been delayed because of evil, but because the righteous have yet to take their place? We say the temple must be rebuilt. We debate its location. We analyze the timing. We argue over the role of Israel, the arrival of the Antichrist, the alignment of global powers. But none of these things, not even the abomination itself, can fully occur until one thing happens. The covenant must be in place, and the covenant people must be present. Not just present on paper, or by ancestry, or by confession. Present in posture, awake in purpose. The holy place was never meant to be empty. When Jesus warned, "When you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place," he wasn't just pointing to a future moment. He was pointing to a void. Something would enter because something or someone had left. The tragedy wasn't simply that the abomination would come. The deeper tragedy was that no one would be standing there to stop it. We imagine fulfillment as automatic, that once evil reaches a certain threshold, events will unfold. But the biblical pattern is deeper. Fulfillment always requires partnership. God gave the land, but Israel had to walk in and take it. God revealed the Messiah, but people had to follow him. God pours out his Spirit, but hearts must receive it. So why would the end be any different? What if the prophecy has not failed to come true? Because the world isn't ready, but because the church isn't awake. What if the temple is not waiting to be rebuilt out of stone, but waiting to be occupied by living stones? What if the priesthood has been re-established, but the priests have yet to return to the altar? This isn't delay, this is mercy. The clock has not stopped ticking. The countdown Daniel saw is not in the hands of governments or war or crisis. It's in the hands of those who were called to keep the covenant alive. And if they forget their role, if they abandon their post, if they trade their priesthood for passivity, then yes, the abomination will stand, because no one else will. But that means something terrifying and beautiful. It means we are not powerless. It means prophecy is not a wave that crashes down without warning. It means we are not only witnesses, we are participants. And the delay is not because God changed his mind. It's because he is still calling those who were written into this hour. So ask yourself this: what if the prophecy is waiting on you? What if standing in the holy place is not about watching from the outside, but about rising from within? What if the reason the desolation has not yet come is because God is giving one last moment for his priests to return? The time is not in Satan's hands. The timeline was never his to control. It belongs to the one who holds all things together. And he has not released what comes next, not because he can't, but because he still waits. Not for the Antichrist, but for the awakened priesthood. Fulfillment is near. But it does not arrive without someone standing in the gap. Not just a temple, not just a covenant, a person, a calling. A priest returned to the place they left. You are not too late, but the hour is close, and the holy place will not remain empty forever. You were never meant to stand on the sidelines, watching prophecy unfold like a movie you didn't audition for. You weren't cast as an extra in the background of someone else's story. From the beginning, from the foundations of the earth, you were written in. This is not poetic metaphor, this is reality. Psalm 139 says that every day ordained for you was written in God's book before one of them came to be. Revelation speaks of a book of life, written with names not at the end, but from the beginning. Daniel himself was told to seal up the book until the time of the end, a book that would only make sense when the appointed ones began to awaken. You've heard about the Antichrist, about the beast, about the abomination that causes desolation. You've studied the signs, followed the timelines, marked the patterns. But did you ever stop to wonder, where are you in all of this? Because prophecy doesn't just name kings and kingdoms, it names a people, a royal priesthood, a remnant, a voice crying out, a watchman on the wall, a temple not built with hands but with living stones, a covenant not etched in tablets of stone but written on hearts. That's not distant imagery, that's you. You were not called to fear the darkness, but to be light. You were not called to decode prophecy from a distance, but to step into it, to answer it, to fulfill the part only you can play. The book is still open, the story is still unfolding, and the missing piece might not be another political event or another global crisis, but a single person who finally says, "Here I am." What if the abomination enters not because evil was stronger, but because someone who was written to stand chose to sit? If you think this calling is too high, too ancient, too sacred for you, good. That's how all the real ones feel. No one who belongs in the holy place ever thinks they deserve it. But they go anyway, because God called them. Because the covenant was never based on worthiness, but on faithfulness. The end times are not a theater for spectators. They are a summons, and somewhere your name has already been called. Your moment has already been marked, not as a passive observer, not as a fearful survivor, but as a living stone, a keeper of covenant, a name inscribed in a book that will never pass away. And if you've ever wondered whether your life was random, if you've ever questioned why you were born into this generation, this moment, this world on the edge of fulfillment, know this: it was no accident. The author doesn't make mistakes, and he doesn't write characters he doesn't plan to use. You were written into the prophecy, not just to know it, but to live it, to carry it, to stand in the part of the story that only you can fill. The prophecy has not passed you by. The clock hasn't stopped. The end hasn't arrived without you. Because until the one who was called to stand returns to their place, the story remains open. That's not delay, that's mercy. God is not waiting on governments or temples or treaties. He's waiting on hearts, waiting on the watchmen who fell asleep, waiting on the priests who forgot they were anointed, waiting on the ones written into the story but still standing outside it, unsure, unready, unaware. You are not just a viewer of prophetic events. You are the one the prophecy is waiting for. Every time you feel the urgency, the unrest, the sense that the world is turning faster than we can comprehend, it's not just a warning, it's a whisper, a summons. The covenant is still open. The call still goes out, but the window will not stay open forever. Scripture says the Son of Man will come at an hour no one expects, and he will ask one question of those he finds. Were you watching? Were you ready? Were you faithful in your post? You don't have to understand every timeline. You don't have to solve every riddle. You simply have to return. Return to the place of covenant. Return to the posture of worship. Return to the role you were given, not because you're perfect, but because you were chosen. You are the temple now, not of stone, but of spirit. The altar is no longer in Jerusalem alone. It's wherever a surrendered heart makes room for holiness. And the abomination that desecrates the sacred will not be able to stand where the presence of God has already filled the space. But space must be made. There's still time, not much, but enough. Enough to say yes, enough to turn back, enough to take your place, because no false Messiah can fill a temple that's already occupied by truth. This is your invitation, not to fear, but to faith, not to panic, but to presence, not to escape, but to endure. The door is still open, but it will not stay open forever. So step forward, take your place. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You are not too late. You are the keeper of something sacred, and the hour has come to return. We spend our lives searching for signs, We watch the news, scan the headlines, track every earthquake, every treaty, every conflict in the Middle East. We listen closely for rumors of war, whispers of peace, announcements of temples being rebuilt. We mark timelines on our walls and count prophetic days like stepping stones toward the end. But what if the sign we've been waiting for is us? What if the most important fulfillment isn't happening in governments or in global events, but in the heart of one person who finally awakens to their calling? You've heard the prophecies. You've traced Daniel's timeline, memorized Revelation's warnings, analyzed the abomination that causes desolation. You know what to expect. At least, you think you do. But maybe the real reason the prophecy hasn't come to pass is not because the world isn't ready, but because someone hasn't responded. In the last video, we uncovered a difficult truth. The delay is not in God's timeline, it's in ours. The prophecy hasn't failed. The people meant to fulfill it simply haven't stepped into place. And now we return to that same question, but this time we turn it inward. What if you were written into this prophecy from the very beginning, not as a spectator, but as a sign, not a warning to others, but a confirmation to the heavens that one generation finally understood their hour? You're not late, you're not outside the story. You are the sign that time has reached its appointed moment. You were written in, and the time has come to remember where. Have you ever wondered why you were born into this generation and not another? Why you're living in the era of converging crises, prophetic acceleration, and growing spiritual unrest? Of all the times in history you could have existed, why this one? The answer isn't random, and it isn't an accident. Scripture is clear. Generations are not assigned by chance. Each one is shaped, appointed, and positioned by the hand of the one who sees the end from the beginning. Acts 17:26 says that God determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. That means your birth, your placement in time, was not just permitted, it was purposed. You weren't simply born into the last days, you were sent into them. That changes everything. Because if this generation has been marked as the generation of culmination, if these are the days when prophecy awakens, when covenants converge, when ancient scrolls are unsealed, then your presence here isn't observational, it's participatory. You may have thought you were watching the fulfillment, but what if you are part of the fulfillment? The very fact that you are alive in this hour, hearing these words, wrestling with these questions, might be the first sign that your name was written into a calling you've only just begun to remember. And if that's true, then the time to keep watching is over. The time to respond has begun. Before time took its first breath, before the foundations of the earth were laid, before the stars were placed or the oceans carved their borders, there was a book not bound in leather or ink, but in eternity. Psalm 139 declares it plainly. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. That is not poetry. That is identity. This book is not symbolic. It's real. And it's not the only one. Scripture speaks of many books in heaven. The book of life, recording the names of those who belong to the Lamb, Revelation 21:27. The book of remembrance, mentioned in Malachi 3:16, where God listens to those who fear him and honors his name and writes their names down. the book of the righteous, implied in Exodus and Psalms, holding those whose hearts are aligned with covenant. Daniel 12:1 says that in the time of great distress, everyone whose name is found written in the book will be delivered. Not everyone. Everyone whose name is written. This means the final deliverance isn't just about what happens, it's about who's remembered. To be written is to be known, to be remembered, to be called, and not all are. The sobering truth is that not all are written, not all remain, and not all respond. But there is another truth, deeper still. Those who are being awakened in this hour, the ones whose spirits are stirred by what's unfolding, who feel the tug of something ancient and holy calling them forward, those are the ones who were written. You wouldn't be drawn to these words if your name weren't already echoing in the book. That's why you feel the pull, because something in you remembers being remembered. And if you are written in, then you are not nameless in the eyes of God. You are not lost in the chaos of the world. You are not just one of many. You are known. And your knowing didn't begin at birth. It began in eternity. Daniel saw a vision too vast for his time. He was given glimpses of kingdoms, judgments, messengers, and glory. But at the end, he was told something strange. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Daniel 12:4. Not forever, just until the appointed moment. Why seal a message unless it's meant to be opened later? Because some truths can only be carried by those prepared to walk in them. Some callings remain hidden until the generation they were written for begins to stir. If you understand these things, not in intellect alone, but in spirit, if something within you senses that what you're hearing now is not new, but familiar, then take it as a sign. The seal is breaking. The book is opening, and the ones who were written in are being summoned to read. You may not have known what you were waiting for. You may not have realized why the world's shaking feels strangely personal, but now you do, because the moment you begin to see the book, not as a scroll in the clouds, but as the record of your assignment, you realize this isn't just prophecy being revealed, it's memory being restored. You are one of the readers because you are one of the written. And the moment a sealed book begins to open, it's not for observation, it's for fulfillment. The book was closed for ages, not because God forgot, but because he was waiting for the ones he wrote into its pages to open their eyes, take their place, and finish what he began. If you feel the pages turning, it's because your name is in them. Not just to be saved, but to be activated. You were written for now, and now is being written by your response. Being written into the book is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a responsibility. Many are named, but few step into the portion that name carries. Many are called, but not all respond. And the difference between being written and being remembered is what you do with what you've been given. If your name is in the book, then there is a portion assigned to you, a role, a place, a piece of the mission that no one else can carry. Not because you're better, not because you earned it, but because God, in his sovereignty, chose to write you into this exact chapter of history. That means your life is not just something to endure, it is something to fulfill. The Bible is filled with people who were written in, but didn't know it at first. Esther didn't recognize the weight of her placement in the palace until Mordecai said, "Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this?" Esther 4:14. Jeremiah protested that he was too young, too afraid, until God said, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Jeremiah 1:5. These weren't spontaneous moments. These were written assignments, activated when the person became aware. So, what about you? If you have been written into this generation, then your timing is not accidental. Your presence here is part of a divine equation, and your portion, your assignment, cannot be delegated. It may be delayed. It may be resisted. It may be buried under fear, distraction, or discouragement, but it cannot be replaced. There is something that was meant to happen through you, and if you don't rise, if you don't step forward, it's not just your portion that is lost. It is your generation's balance that is altered, because every story has its missing link. Every calling carries its weight, and heaven is still waiting for someone to say, "Here I am. I know I was written. I want to carry what I was given." This isn't about platform. It isn't about fame. It's about obedience, the quiet kind, the sacred kind, the kind that says yes even when no one else is watching. So ask yourself deeply, honestly, what is my portion? What part of the covenant am I called to keep alive? What word am I supposed to speak? What gate am I meant to guard? Because the book is not a record of names alone. It is a record of trust. And if your name is there, your assignment still waits. Being written into the book is a beginning, but it is not a guarantee. In Exodus 32, after Israel sinned with the golden calf, Moses pleaded with God to forgive them. And if not, he said, "Blot me out of the book you have written." But God answered, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book." That moment shattered any assumption that once a name is written, it remains forever. There is a line between being written and being remembered. This isn't about perfection, it's about covenant. Revelation 3:5 says, "The one who overcomes will be clothed in white garments, and I will never blot out their name from the book of life." The condition is clear: those who overcome, those who endure, those who remain faithful to what they were called to carry. There is a book, and there is a keeping, and the weight of your name is measured not by your knowledge of prophecy, but by your response to it. We often assume our place is secured because we recognize the signs. But Scripture reveals a deeper truth. Recognizing the season does not preserve your name. Responding in obedience does. God doesn't forget names, but He does remove the names of those who abandon their portion, who sever themselves from covenant, who silence the voice they were given. This is not meant to stir fear, but reverence. Because if your name was written before the world began, it wasn't just written for salvation, it was written for partnership, for trust, for action. And trust, once broken, has consequences. The book is holy, and it remembers not only who you were, but what you did with what you were given. There is a line spoken by Mordecai to Esther that echoes through the ages. She hesitated, afraid to approach the king, unsure if the risk was worth it. And Mordecai said, "If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from another place, but you and your father's house will perish." In other words, the story will continue, but your part in it may not. This is the sobering beauty of God's plan. He doesn't force you into it. He invites you. But if you decline, the assignment will not vanish. It will shift. It will move. It will rest on someone else, someone who says yes when you said nothing. And in that moment, something eternal is lost. Not the plan of God, but your place in it. You may still breathe, you may still believe, but the scroll will turn, and your portion, meant to be etched in glory, will be marked by silence. That's not punishment, that's consequence. The books of heaven do not only record what we said yes to, they also record when we stayed quiet, when we waited too long, when we assumed the call could wait. This is not about performance, it's about faithfulness. It's about being where you were written to be. At the time, you were written to be there. If you remain silent, deliverance will come. The covenant will move forward. But your name may no longer be next to the part you were called to fulfill. The window is still open, but not forever. And if you are hearing this now, it's because there is still time. You are still written. But what is written next depends on what you choose now. Prophecy has never been just a map of future events. It's a mirror, held up to those living in the moment it was written for. And the longer we stare at it from a distance, the more we miss the truth. It's not pointing away from us, it's pointing to us. Daniel 11:32 speaks of a moment in the midst of great deception and collapse. But then it says something remarkable. But the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. It doesn't say the powerful will stand or the famous. It says the ones who know their God, the ones who recognize who they belong to, and why they were born into this time. That verse isn't a comfort blanket, it's a commissioning. And if you feel the weight of these words, it may be because they were written for you. You are not on the outside of the timeline, looking in. You are standing inside a prophetic hour, and heaven is still waiting on your response. So much of the church asks, when will it happen? But the more urgent question is, what will I do when it does? Because if the days are darkening, if the scroll is being unsealed, if the signs are converging, then it is not just time to observe, it is time to act. You were not merely born for such a time as this, you were appointed for it. What if the part of the prophecy we're waiting on is the part you were meant to fulfill? What if the next unfolding does not depend on a new world event, but on the rising of one person who finally says, "This is my hour, this is my role, this is my yes"? You were not written into this generation to drift through it. You were assigned, called, positioned. And the moment you stop seeing prophecy as something that happens to you and begin seeing it as something that happens through you, everything shifts. This is not about grandeur. This is about obedience. This is not about pressure. This is about presence. God doesn't call the ready. He calls the willing, and then He fills them. So ask yourself one final question, not in fear, not in theory, but in faith. What if this isn't just the end of the age? What if this is the moment when the part you were written to carry is finally being read aloud? And what if your answer is what heaven has been waiting for all along? There is a part of this story that only you can carry. It is not borrowed. It is not assigned to someone else. It bears your name, your timing, your fingerprints. And until you step into it, that space remains open, not just in the timeline of prophecy, but in the heart of the one who wrote you into it. This is not a generic call. This is not a message for the masses. This is personal, because you already know Something in you has always sensed it, that your life was not random, that your birth was timed, that your soul was stirred by things most people ignore, that you carry a weight that can't be explained by personality or upbringing or talent. It's something deeper, something eternal. And now, the moment has come to return to it. Not return to a religion, not return to striving or proving or earning, but to return to the part of you that was always waiting to be awakened, to return to the covenant, to the trust, to the sacred role you were always meant to carry in this final hour. This is not about knowing every detail of the future. It's about responding in the present, about standing where you've been called to stand before that place is filled by something else. Because time is still moving, the book is still open, but the page does not wait forever. Every day you delay, the space grows colder. Every moment you hesitate, the voice gets quieter. But even now, even in the silence, your portion has not been given away. Not yet, because the one who wrote your name does not forget. And he is still calling. So return, step in, say yes. Not because you feel ready, but because you finally know it was never about being ready. It was always about being written. You don't need a sign. You are the sign. You don't need permission. You already carry the invitation. And the part of the prophecy you were meant to fulfill is still waiting for the only person it was ever meant for, you.